This is an initiation into really, really deep esoteric material that has been hidden from humanity for millennia. I am not going to present anything that has not actually been in existence and will continue to be in existence. I'm not making up new material. My presentation style has been described by some as extremely intense and at times even combative. The fact of the matter is that truth itself, by its very nature, is belligerent. I don't even really want to do this. The fact that I do already understand this information places me in a position of moral obligation and responsibility. That's why I do what I do. Many modern institutions, like media, like so-called education institutions, are seeking to actually control human perceptions, or let's call it outright what it really is, to control the mind, okay? And therefore, to limit what human beings may even come to understand, and therefore by limiting what they are coming to understand, they're actually limiting what they're able to do, what they're able to change, what they're able to create in the world. If you want to talk about the biggest religion, if these other religions aren't big enough and powerful enough for you, there's the one that is the ultimate power in the world, the ultimate religion, the God of this world, if you will. Okay, now, how many people here came here today thinking that they were going to hear information about the occult by a show of hands? Okay, about half the room. Good. Okay, for the rest of the people, that may come as a shock. But what you have to understand right off the bat is that the word occult, it's simply derived from Latin, the Latin adjective occultus. Occultus in Latin means hidden, hidden from sight. The knowledge of the occult, the hidden knowledge about how natural law works and how consciousness works, is not commonly known. That's why it's not the exoteric. It's not given to the masses. It's the esoteric. It is reserved for the few. And there's a reason for that. It's been deliberately hidden away and kept from the general public in order to create and maintain a power differential. Because if someone else is an extreme level of knowledge, they know how something works, like something as trivial as how human consciousness works, how human motivations work, how human perceptions work, how human beings can be manipulated. If somebody has deep knowledge of that information, and there's a whole bunch of people over here who have not one iota of how that works, what kind of a number do you think somebody can do on people like that? Well, guess what? That's the position humanity's in. We're that punk jock. And I'm not saying we necessarily did something to deserve it, but we're in that same position where the people with this knowledge at the highest levels, they hate us. And they're doing a total number on us because we don't have this knowledge. From my years of being inside occult traditions that are very, very dark, I'm telling you, this is what they don't want you to know from firsthand experience. How many people even have heard the term nescience? Very few. This is a word that has practically been sanitized from colloquial English, practically been sanitized from the English language. It means to not understand because the specific information that you may be having a desire to understand is completely absent. It is not present, and you cannot actually aggregate that information. You can't bring those pieces of grammar together to form the sentence, okay? It's not present, okay? So you don't have it at all. It's unattainable. This should be clearly delineated from ignorance. Now, nescience is not someone's fault. The information just isn't there. Okay, you can't be blamed for nescience. There is no blame in nescience. The person who is nescient is not to be blamed for being nescient. The information simply wasn't present so they could take it in and then come to understand it. Ignorance carries blame. I tell people, start pronouncing it ignorance. Ignorance. then people will hear the word ignore in it. And the connotation becomes clear. It means you're ignoring it. Ignorance. Okay? That's how I like to say it now. Because the connotation is clear that way. The information is there. The truth is there. And somebody wants to ignore it completely. Now, that is inexcusable. And there is blame that is attached with that. Many of them will see the rising police state. They'll see the injustices in our society. They'll see the restrictions on our inherent natural liberty. But here's the thing, many of them will not make the transition to grasping. They'll say, yeah, this is what's happening to the earth. It's being turned into a huge prison everywhere. And they'll see this lock going on to the cage. But the question that they never get to, they don't even get to the question, let alone the answer, is why. They'll talk about the symptoms. They'll describe the prison. They'll describe every corner of the cage accurately in many cases. They could tell you exactly how it's working. They can tell you all the different aspects of the control system, but they can't tell you why it's actually going into place. Why is that happening? Well, that's what this presentation answers. Truth is always present. It's always here. It's a matter of will we perceive it as being present, acknowledge it's present by stop ignoring it, okay, and then accept it into ourselves, and then do something with it. My life goes on very well according to how I live it without hurting anybody else. The problem is other people. And that's another thing the New Agers won't acknowledge, and they'll flip out if you say that there's a problem with someone else. There are problems with other people, okay? And people will say people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. My glass house has been taken down long since, long time ago, because I went through all that personal introspective work. And I dug deep into my subconscious and faced those problems and confronted them head on and healed them. And please take note, ladies and gentlemen, when you're in this position, when you're in the position of denial with your head in the sand, you're on your knees with your ass in the air. Okay? And I almost say it's amazingly synchronistic that the human body was designed like that. That in order to put your head in the sand, symbolically, so to speak, you have to be on your knees. Okay? And that's where most of our society is at. They're on their knees. When people say perception is reality, nothing could be farther from reality than that statement. Perception is not reality. Truth is objective. That means that it's not dependent upon the perceptions of human beings. No one wants to hear that. That is a direct assault, a direct frontal assault on the human ego. Travis Walton says in his book, which is called Fire in the Sky, he said, I have come to realize that the biggest problem anywhere in the world, the biggest problem anywhere in the world is that people's perceptions of reality are compulsively filtered through the screening mesh of what they want and do not want to be true. Now, the reason I even bring this up and included Travis's quote here is at this conference that we were just at a couple of weeks ago, okay, I didn't speak at it, I tabled at it. A woman came up to my table and she picked up my New Age Bullshit DVD, which is available here today in the back. And she said, what's this about? With a real skeptical look. And I explained, I said, well, it's a 7-hour extended video podcast that has many, many slides, okay? I gave a shortened version of it at the Free Your Mind conference in Philadelphia. And this is the extended version that goes deeply into the deception of the New Age movement and how it is a religion that is designed to suppress the masculine side of the personality, which is the side that actually takes action and creates change. Okay? And that's, of course, pushed by the sacred feminine, which is care and creativity, and compassion, right? Both need to be present. We're going to talk about that here today. But I said, this is about the suppression of that masculine energy. And that's what the New Age movement is about. The suppression of the masculine, right? So I said, what the New Age religion wants to teach people is just accept everything the way it is, no matter how unjust it is, no matter how deplorable the conditions are, no matter how much evil is taking place in our midst. Accept it. That's the New Age religion. And here's what she said. That's exactly how I am. I just accept everything. I don't make any judgments on anything that occurs, no matter what it is, no matter how it's perceived. You want to perceive it as evil? That's your judgment. I said, yes, it is my judgment. You know why? Because it's evil. It really is. There is such a thing. I said, and you're content to let evil run amok and take this whole world because you don't want to act. Because what's really there is cowardice. That's what it really is. Okay? She didn't want to hear that. She said, I prefer not to see it that way. Now, align this with the quote. The ideology of solipsism is that nothing exists outside of me. I'm the only being that exists in creation. Or essentially, it's another way of saying I'm God. Okay? That my perception is the only real perception and no one else is here. Now imagine that. Now, what I'm essentially telling the audience here today is your perceptions are not the truth. You have to work to align your perceptions with the truth. That's damaging enough to the human ego. Okay? If I just said, none of you exist, I'm only perceiving your existence, I'm the only one who exists. Imagine how egoic that statement is, and actually how demoralizing it is to other people. You're even telling them, I don't even consider that you exist. That's what a solipsist is. They believe the universe is a big illusion created somehow for their amusement. And that there's no objective reality that you don't exist, you don't exist, you don't exist, you don't exist. I'm the only one who exists. When I was a Satanist, okay, and I was working inside the Church of Satan and other dark occult organizations, they have a set of sins, believe it or not. They don't look at them as sins in the same way that, religionists look at sin. But they have the things that, these are behaviors and thought patterns that should not be engaged in by the dark occultist themselves, by the magician, if you will. You are not to engage in these behaviors, but we are to peddle them to other people. We are to get them to engage in these behaviors. Okay? You know what the first one is? No, it's not. That's the second or third. I think it's the third, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the list handy. But the first one is stupidity. That's the first satanic sin. Okay? For the dark occultist. But they want other people in deep stupidity. They want other people in deep ignorance. The idea here is we will know it all. We will know the truth so that we can control others and keep them a dumbed down herd. Okay? There's a bunch of other ones, but I think the second or third is solipsism. And they say we are going to propagate and peddle solipsism like you have never seen. And you know what? When they say something, they do it. I'm serious. They're aligned. Their act is together. They act on the same page. And for that, I have respect for them as an enemy. And I don't take anything they do lightly. I recognize they have the will. They're not like the rest of humanity. They align their thoughts, their knowledge with their version of care. It's not like our emotionally based care, but they care about what they're doing and then they act. And when they act in concert and they get it done. Okay? I'm not saying, I agree with any of their agenda because I don't and I'm trying to stop it. But I have respect for their unity. So definition simply means clarity of meaning when we're applying it to words and concepts. The simple definition of natural is inherent having a basis in nature, reality, and truth, not made or caused by humankind. So if it's natural, wasn't made by man. Mankind didn't make it. Okay? And again, the origin of the word, neter in Egyptian, means spirit, and all means of or related to. So of or related to spirit. It is all of nature, the spiritual domain. See, this is the other part. People believe that the spiritual domain is separate from the physical domain. This is a huge thread and a huge central focus in all of my work. If you think the spiritual domain is not where you are at now because you're in the physical domain, you're mistaken. If you think that the spiritual domain is someplace other than the physical domain, you're also mistaken. If you place emphasis on one above the other and say, well, this one takes precedence and this one's not important. Either way you do it, whether you say the spiritual is more important and the world of matter should not be given any significance, it's imbalance. And it's not true. The word law the definition is an existing condition which is both binding and immutable. So let's look at each one of these words. Existing. It means that it is present. It is present. Okay? It cannot be just ignored and expected that, well, that doesn't make it true and it's not going to have an effect. It's there. It's present. That's why it's a law that it's in operation. That is in operation. It is binding. Binding means it has an effect. It means it doesn't matter whether you believe that it has an effect. It doesn't matter whether you understand that it has an effect. It doesn't care. Your belief will not change natural law, but your inquiry into it can lead to an understanding of it. You can develop the knowledge of it if you are willing to open your mind and look at how these laws function and what we're getting as a result of our disharmony with them. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said that there are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what is not true, and the other is to refuse to accept what is true. Okay? So, believing in untrue notions, which is what religion is, all forms of it, all the 5 religions I posted at the beginning of the presentation. One's called government and authority, okay? Or politics, however you want to name it. The other one is money, finance. There's another religion. One of them is the New Age movement, and one of them is scientism, which I'm not going to refer to as real science because it is not. It is a belief system and a religion. So what Kierkegaard is saying here is you could believe things that aren't true, and that will hold you back. And you can refuse to accept what is true, and that will also hold you back. I say these are the only 2 ways that humanity ever creates self-inflicted suffering for itself. You want to know how suffering is created for the human species? That it doesn't need to experience? We believe what's not true. We refuse to accept what is true. So let's look at consciousness and the human brain. Being conscious of something, meaning having consciousness of it, is an ability of the being to recognize patterns. Remember, this is all about pattern recognition. To recognize patterns and meaning with respect to events that are taking place or have taken place, okay, both within oneself, okay, in the inner realm, in the lesser realm, the realm of the individuated consciousness, and in the realm in which the self exists and operates, the macrocosm. So it's our ability to accurately perceive truth of what has happened and what is happening. That's consciousness. Now, how does consciousness express? There's a difference between what it is and how it expresses in our life. How can any other being come to know who you are in this incarnation, in this physical manifestation? How could they possibly come to know you? How could you manifest yourself or make yourself known to them? And there's only 3 ways: thoughts, emotions, and actions. Saving ourselves will only come through action. Action will save humanity. Faith will not do it. People don't understand that exoteric Christianity is created by the dark occult, of the ancient dark occult mystery schools. They don't understand where this religion came from because they haven't studied astrotheology. And I'm not telling you there's no good concepts in any religion. I say take all the good concepts and leave the nonsense. Because one of the nonsense is that you need to believe in something to be saved from the current human condition. You don't need to believe in a thing. You need to know the truth. And right in their own religion, there it is. Let me just stay on this for a moment, because in their own scripture, the exoteric Christian scriptures, what is the one prescription that the Christ figure gives to the people when he is asked about freedom? He's only asked about freedom like once in the Gospels, okay? In the words attributed to his teachings. And they want to know what will save us, what will make us free, and what is his prescription?
Truth shall make you free.
No, that is not. There's something missing there. You're close. What is the actual saying? Know the truth. Knowing the truth will make you free. That's the prescription, even in exoteric Christianity. It's right there in the Gospels. But Christians don't want to hear that because the controllers in the church who came from the dark priest class gave them this nonsense that all you have to do is believe and everything will magically change. Well, good luck with that. When people's behaviors have no alignment with morality, you think your belief's going to change something? Again, let me know how that works out for you. And again, I'm not mincing words up here. I'm telling it like it really is. I don't care who it offends. Let's put it this way. The left side of the brain being chronically dominant, you have the controller. That's the master mentality. The right side of the brain being chronically dominant, that's the slave mentality. That's the I won't stand up for myself and I'll just accept everything. The total new ager, in other words. Okay? So this part of the brain, if it's chronically dominant, the opposite happens with the structures of the brain. The R complex will shut down. It will suffer. Okay, it will not work properly, which the R complex is necessary. It makes you stand up for yourself when you're under attack. Again, it's the fight-flight response. In a dangerous situation, you got to know whether you're going to fight whatever's attacking you or whether you're going to get out of dodge and run away. Okay, that's a survival mechanism that's necessary when there's danger. So when this part of the brain is chronically imbalanced, the R complex gets shut down. People freeze essentially, and they don't stand up for themselves and take action. What's happening is they're being ruled by their emotions. And again, the limbic brain governs all emotions, positive and negative. So that's compassion and that's fear. It's any possible human emotion. The midbrain is what's ultimately facilitating that emotion in the physiology. Intellect is not intelligence. Let me say that again. Intellect is not intelligence. Intelligence comprises more than intellect. Intellect is left brain understanding. True intelligence is holistic understanding with the right brain included in the process. The nurturing, compassionate, creative, and intuitive sides of the consciousness together with the intellectual aspect of the consciousness. And you could see this in the word. Intelligence, right? Intella is where intellect comes from, okay? And gens, G-E-N-C-E, comes from the Latin verb generare. Generare means to generate or to create. So it's the creative aspect of the personality or the right brain. So intellect plus creativity, logical thinking plus nurturing and compassion. That's real intelligence, holistic intelligence. And most people in our society are not in holistic intelligence. They're in one form of brain imbalance or the other. Moral relativism is one of the big tenets of Satanism. It's actually one of the pillars of Satanism. Social Darwinism is highly praised and valued in Satanism, and eugenics. Okay? Because if people don't understand what eugenics is basically people, who have gone so deep into this form of left brain imbalance that they believe they're God and they can get to decide who lives and who dies. That's really what it is. We will control who breeds and who does not get to breed, who gets to live and who does not get to live. Accepting orders from other people, being an order follower. We're going to have a whole section on order followers later and how this is the exact opposite of anything virtuous. For people that believe order following is some kind of a virtue, I don't know what to tell you, but it's the thing that leads to all evil in the world, is accepting somebody's orders and not actually gauging for yourself whether the activity, the behavior is moral or not. When there's chronic left brain dominance, the worldview that emerges is one of randomness. And again, this is a hallmark of scientism. The world is this grand cosmic accident. All right? The whole universe is a grand accident. There's no purpose. Right? There's no creator. Everything just magically manifested on its own for no reason from a single singularity, a single point in space-time for no reason. You give me that one, and I'll tell you everything else that happened after that. But you got to give me that one, and I have some bridges to sell you, We're at about 2/3 of people who are moral relativists and believe that truth is relative also, that it's not objective. Okay? Now, you ask the same people, do you believe in karma? 88, almost 90% of people believe karma is real and it exists. So I'm like, I can't believe this. You're going to tell me that there's no such thing as a real difference between right and wrong. They're constructs in the human mind is what they think, right? And simultaneously holding in their mind the idea that karma exists. Well, I asked them the question, what put karma in place then? You believe it exists. What force created it? What made it? What put it in place? And they have no answer for that. Okay? It doesn't matter what's actually moral. Okay? It's all subjective to a left brain imbalanced individual. And to them, nothing has any purpose. Since it's all a grand cosmic accident, how could there be a purpose for existence? Without a creator, who's going to create the purpose for it? So it has no purpose other than to continue surviving. And again, that's right there is proof they're in the R complex, they're in the base brain. Survival is the highest goal. Survival is the only aspiration. Now, in Satanism, it's about as left brain imbalanced as it gets, folks. You know what their number one law is? Survival. Stephen Hawking, who you would think is the most left brain person that you could think worships at the altar of scientism, believes the universe is a grand accident, okay, and a mechanized machine, okay. It's like this comes full circle. It feeds off of each other like a feedback loop, these forms of imbalance. He went so far through left brain imbalance, he's so in the left brain that he actually developed the hallmark of right brain imbalance, which is that there's no such thing as free will. No such thing. Since it's all a mechanized machine and there's no consciousness, there can actually be no choice. We are actually robots controlled by matter. Hawking believes this. He actually wrote this in his book. He said free will is as dead as God. Okay? And millions of people buy this moron's books, and I'll call him a moron right to his face. There's not a drop of intelligence in that man, and people think he's one of the most intelligent people in the world. You might be one of the most overly intellectual people in the world, but you have no wisdom at all. Zero, if that's how you think. And again, put him in front of me and I'll tell it to him to his face. Every single solitary being that is capable of thinking at all is gifted with free will. You have free will to choose your behaviors, and so does every other human being. Everyone. Okay? It's a gift of creation itself. So what's the nature of a human being? The nature of a human being is that it takes in information, it processes it, and then it outputs it through behavior. And as we're going to see, that's very much like a computer. I'm not saying that it is a computer. I'm saying it's like one. We are programmable. That's the nature of a human being. And there's another thing. That's another thing people don't want to hear. They don't want to hear this because they liken it to a mechanized machine. And I'm not saying, again, to emphasize, I'm not saying we are computers. I'm saying we're like them in the ways that we can be programmed. So what gets put into a person through the environment, which is called the culture, all right, and becomes their programming, determines what they will output onto the screen, which is called human life. And that will create the human condition in the aggregate as more and more people operate that way. If you have understanding present, your decision-making processes are going to be in harmony with what you say you want. You're going to understand, if here's what I want, this is what's necessary to get that, to make that happen, to manifest it. That's understanding. It's a decision-making process that happens within the mind. These processes take place in the human mind and are chosen by each individual based upon available information. So again, you can see if information is held back, if it is occulted, or even if it's just people are dissuaded from taking it in because people will say, no, there's nothing there. There's nothing to it, right? You could see how they'll never get to this step. They'll never understand. They'll never get to the second level of creating our reality. The third stage to this process is what you do with what you have come to understand. See, people don't think of wisdom as behavior. They don't think of wisdom as action. They think of it as something that you just know. No, wrong. Wisdom is not knowledge or understanding. Wisdom is action. Let me say this again. Wisdom is action. It is knowledge and understanding that has been applied. Based upon these three processes, something is generated. Something is created in the physical manifestation, physically manifested reality, the real world, so to speak. The manifested reality is based upon the aggregate behavior. Aggregate behavior. No one person is creating the reality we are experiencing. Okay? It's another fallacy of the New Age movement and thinking. In the aggregate, we are creating our shared reality. We read Gaius Julius Caesar's war journals in their original Latin and translated them. And in one of them, he's talking about, he's absolutely lambasting one of his centurions. Okay, they're on a campaign in Gaul, which is France now. And Caesar is, making his rounds of his troops, and they're getting ready to, push deeper into Gaul. And he finds, when they would have their encampments, they would have a lot of, slaves of the Roman Empire that they would take with them on their campaigns that would do a lot of the lifting of the equipment and the carrying of the equipment for the centurions to do battle in the next battlefield location. And the slaves would have to do all that manual labor. And Caesar says to one of his centurions, he's passing by their encampment and he sees one of the actual centurion leaders teaching one of the slaves the trivium method. And he flips out on him in this journal. He says, I caught one of my centurions, teaching the trivium, and freaks out on him. How dare you teach a slave our method of learning? Soon they won't want to be a slave anymore. There'd be an uprising if they knew what we knew, if they knew our truth discovery methodology. The word principles, let's define it. Principle comes from the Latin noun principia. Principia means first, foremost, leading, chief, or most necessary. It is that which matters most. It is the first things that must be understood before anything else can be understood. Principles have to come first. And this is the problem. Our society does not put principles first. It puts trivialities first, and we're no longer a society that even cares about principles or first things. So first things first. First things or principles have to come first. So let's look at what the principles that underlie natural law. These are the things that are most important. That's what principles should mean to people. If we ask people to define what a principle is, first thing they should say, that's the most important thing. These are what I call the general principles of natural law. Natural law is expressed through 7 basic underlying principles, plus what I have referred to as an eighth or hidden principle, which you hear very few other researchers, even people who are studying this from the occult perspective, who are studying this from the consequentialism perspective, you very hear them incorporate the eighth and all-encompassing principle, which I'll get to last here. These are the 7 general principles of natural law. Many people who have studied some variants of occultism may recognize these as what are known as the Hermetic principles. Hermetic essentially comes from Hermes. Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great one, as he was referred to in the ancient Greek mystery traditions. Okay? He was considered a messenger of the gods. He brought the wisdom of the gods down to humanity. Okay? In the ancient Egyptian and Cometian traditions, he was the scribe of the gods known as Thoth. All right? He has other incarnations as well. But the Hermetic tradition is named such because it's hermetically sealed, like natural law is. Natural law is hermetically sealed. It is binding principles that are immutable. They are laws that are in operation that cannot be changed. Hence, they are hermetically sealed. So these 7 general principles, they are mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, which is a huge one, which we'll be getting into, and gender. So I'm going to briefly describe what each of these are and what they are about. The principle of mentalism states that the all, everything in creation, is actually a manifestation of mind. The all is mind. Okay, what this means is everything that happens has to be a result of a mental state which preceded it. Everything. For anything to exist, thoughts had to form first. So that's the principle of mentalism. The principle of correspondence states that that which is above is similar or like to that which is below. So what this means is that which is below, and that which is below is like to that which is above. It's a mirror, okay? The above is like the below is like the above, all right? The above, in this case, is the macrocosm, okay? The laws of the very large things, okay? The laws that govern the creation, which we consider is seemingly outside of ourselves. We know at the deepest level that it's not, that we're one with it, but, we perceive this as out here, the laws that govern the large aspects of things. So the macrocosm, or the very large, the totality of everything, and the microcosm, which is the very small, or the individuated units that comprise the whole in their aggregate, okay? They are reflections of each other. They cannot be separated from each other. As one goes, the other goes. The universe is actually a holographic system, okay? It's a hologram is an image, okay? You pass a laser through it, and it then projects a 3D image, okay? It's like a flat image, and it projects a 3-dimensional image. But the aspect, why they call it a holo, like holistic hologram, holistic image, is if you break a hologram into multiple components by cutting it. So if I take a hologram and I cut it in 4 pieces, you don't have a quarter of the image on one part of the hologram and a quarter on the other and a quarter on the third and a quarter on the fourth. You have 4 whole images that only lose their resolution by a quarter. Okay? So everything is contained in all the smaller parts. Okay? That's like the reality that we're living in. Our universe is a holographic one. So the universe is inside the individual. And the entire universe is like an individual. They're reflections of each other. To know the workings of the individual will help lead us to an understanding of the macrocosmic laws. Similarly, to learn the macrocosmic laws will help us to learn the way that consciousness within the individual functions. These two things cannot be separated from each other. And once again, as I said near the beginning, that's what occulted knowledge is. The knowledge of the occult is how the microcosmic world works, which is the individuated consciousness, and how the macrocosmic world works, which is natural law. The principle of vibration simply states that there is no such thing as rest, as dead or non-motion, okay? Death, in that sense, is an illusion because true death would be the cessation of all motion and energy. There is no such thing. It doesn't exist. You cannot go anywhere in creation where something is at complete rest. The principle of polarity states that everything has a dual nature to it. There are polarities in everything that exists, okay? Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. However, opposites, they are identical in nature, but they're different in degree. So let me give you an example of what that means. Are hot and cold really opposites? Or can we simply look at them as the presence of heat energy or the absence of heat energy? Meaning that they're the same thing, energy. And whether it's concentrated in a specific area, which would make it hot, or whether it's absent from a specific area, which would make it cold. Let's look at the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Okay, so everything has a rhythm to it or a swing to it. There's tendencies that exist in energy. The pendulum swing manifests in everything that we undergo, everything that we perceive. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. It's just an opposite. It's perceived as an opposite. Rhythm will compensate. Now, how this should be understood when we are talking about natural law is many people will say, well, that's just the way the tendency is moving us. It's just the way the tide is taking us, right? But that's not really accurate. Okay? We can't look at these things as that the rhythms are set in stone and it has to be this way now, right? One of the things that a lot of the Hermetic tradition taught regarding these laws, these principles, were they can be overcome by higher levels of consciousness. Okay? This one was one of them. Rhythm is a principle that is a tendency for something to swing a certain way. Let's liken it to genetics. You know, if you look at some newer biology, a lot of modern biologists are suggesting consciousness plays into whether a gene activates or not and expresses a certain condition. Well, this is the same way. There's something that can be done about the swing or the tide, okay? Let's look at it as you have a boat and you want to row the boat out to sea, right? You have to get past the tide. You have to get past the breakers and the waves. And if that tide's really strong at high tide, it's going to be very much more difficult. You're going to have to expend more energy to get it out to sea. If, however, you were taking it when the current's moving out to sea, okay, there's a flow that's moving outward deeper into the ocean, and you start rowing that boat then, you're going to be able to do it much more easily. This is the principle here in natural law that most fits in with how I'm using the term natural law today, cause and effect. Many people, again, in the New Age community, don't want to believe that there's causes and effects, and that effects are driven by causes that, come first and then manifest conditions. So the principle of cause and effect simply states that every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause. Every single thing that occurs happens according to law. All right? Chance is a name for law, a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So again, is there free will? Yes, there is free will. But is there free will to ignore law without consequence? No, there is not. That's the limit of free will. Free will is operating within boundary conditions that I'm referring to as natural law. It's a series of laws, actually. This is ultimately going to come back and bite us, and what we set into motion is going to actually topple over onto us if we don't change our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Nothing escapes law. We are bound by it eternally. Let me just go back. I'll leave it on this slide for a moment. For some people familiar with my work, you've seen me break down the Matrix trilogy, and the law of cause and effect is brought forward extensively in the second Matrix movie, The Matrix Reloaded. And the scene that encapsulates this the most is the character of the Merovingian, who tells to the heroes who want to be free from the Matrix and its control, okay? you are coming to me without an understanding of why you are in this position. You don't understand the causal factors that have led to the current conditions that are in place. Therefore, you are coming to me with no power to effect change. You are powerless. So why should I help you? You're powerless because you lack knowledge and understanding of what set these events into motion. Why? The question why. He says, why is the only source of real power. Without why, you are powerless. He's talking about cause and effect, and he says it specifically. Causality, he calls the only real truth. And this is the villain. The words of truth come through it's a big technique in Hollywood too. The words of truth are spoken by the villain in the movie or in the series. Okay? But if you listen, and there is a twist, a dark twist to what he says. He says free will is like an illusion. No, it is not. That's where the dark occultist is trying to trip up the heroes. There are both free will and natural law. He tries to say free will. The Morpheus character says to him, everything starts with choice. And Morpheus is correct. Our choices set that causality into motion before it becomes an effect. And the Merovingian tries to tell him, no, there is no free will. That's where the dark occultist will give you the bulk of truth and then poison it with that one thing he wants to get you to accept. Okay? So the next thing that needs to be understood is the two planes. All right? There's the plane of effects and then there's the plane of causes. No power to affect any change lies on the plane of effects, which is the physical manifested reality. Again, what already is, nothing can be done about. What already is, you cannot change. You cannot change the past. You can change what it is starting now and make sure that it gets changed in the future. But right now, what is the truth, and all you could do is accept that or reject it. So let's look at the plane of causality. This is the other plane. This is the mental realm, the mental world. Again, according to the law of mentalism, the first principle of natural law, everything that manifests must first manifest in mind before it can manifest physically. So again, if the plane of causality is the mental world that's generating the causes in mind, okay, everything is happening there first. And then it is trickling down to the physical domain. It is manifesting in the physical domain only after it has manifested in the mental world. This is the higher realm. This is the world of causality, the mental world, the why, the underlying causal factors, okay, that precede conditions which are manifested. This is where our consciousness has to go because this is where all power to effect change is at. In the understanding of why that manifested to begin with. The final principle of the 7 principles of natural law, at least the formalized ones, are gender. Again, I'm going to talk about an 8th lost one. Gender exists in everything. Everything has its masculine and its feminine components or principles. We've already seen that when it comes to the human brain, consciousness, worldview, etc. Gender manifests on all planes of existence. Spiritual, mental, physical, everything. Okay? Very simple concept. What I want to briefly talk about is mental gender. Mental gender is the state of coexistence between the masculine and feminine aspects of the mind. Again, we've already looked at this. We looked at the breakdown of the physiology of the brain, at least of the higher order part of the brain, the neocortex. Our left brain hemisphere largely facilitates the masculine aspects of the mind or the intellect, logic, analytical thought, linear thought processes, while the right brain hemisphere largely facilitates the feminine aspect or intuition, meaning creativity, compassion, and holistic thought processes. This next section is what I call the lost principle. This is the 8th principle of natural law, which binds all of the other principles together. Okay? It is what I would call the encapsulating principle. Okay? It's the container inside which all the other principles fit. However, it's lost because we're not exercising it. See, we already looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 principles of natural law. And there they are represented by these circles overlapping each other. Okay? Can anybody see an eighth circle anywhere? You got it. Correct. Here's the eighth circle. And this might look familiar. You might have seen this somewhere. Okay? This pattern is called something. Does anybody know what this pattern is called? What is it? Not the flower of life. The seed of life. The seed of life. Okay? Now, what happens from a seed? It grows. It generates something. It creates something. A seed has an outer casing, an outer shell. Okay? That if you're going to get to the inner core of it that contains all of the creative, genetic, generative material, okay, that shell has to be there and intact. You break the shell of the seed, the creative essence of the seed is going to be gone. Here's what that principle is. It's the eighth, or what I call the lost principle. And it's the thing that has to be present in order for any change to manifest itself. And it is not what most people think of it as. Even when I tell you what this is, I guarantee you there will be an inaccurate connotative meaning for what people think this means. Okay? Here's what the eighth principle is. It is known as the generative principle, or the principle which governs creation, which actually is the causal factor that goes into effect and generates the result that we say that we want. But what's the real term for it? Who can guess what the actual term, what the generative principle of creation actually is? No, it is not action. Okay? Now, most people will say it's love. I want to distinguish it from the concept of love, even as I'm going to describe love in this presentation a little bit later on. The generative principle is care. Now, this is different than compassion. People say, why don't you use the word compassion? Because that's not what I'm talking about. It is a different concept than compassion, or even what I would describe as love. Care, and I mean care with a capital C, and here I didn't even put it with a capital C. I'm just putting it in all uppercase care. Distinguish this from care with a lowercase c, okay? This means, what are you giving attention and helping to grow? What are you focusing upon? Because what focus you're focusing upon, that's what's ultimately getting generated, getting created, and growing. This is what you're giving your energy to. This is what you're focused upon. This is what you actually care enough about to do, to spend your time on, to put your attention on, to manifest in the world. That's what I'm talking about as care. Okay? That's what generates our experience in the aggregate. Most people don't care about what's really happening. Therefore, it is an impossibility for us in the aggregate to change the direction of energy, to change the direction of consciousness, and ultimately to get what we say we want. That's how the real law of attraction works. All right? Here's how it actually operates. The lost principle is the dynamic of care. What we care about on a day-to-day basis acts as the driving force of our thoughts and actions. What did I say we need to develop? The heart, mind, guts, right? Heart, mind, guts, in that order. Care comes first. You got to care enough to know, to develop the knowledge, okay? Then you got to act on it and put it into practice. Apply it. So that's the order. Heart, mind, guts. Care, knowledge, action. Those are the steps, okay? And all three of those have to be in place. All three. That's what unity consciousness is. It's unifying thoughts, emotions, and actions. The three aspects of consciousness, such that there is no contradiction between them. Our thoughts, what we say, what we think, how we feel, and how we act are one and the same. There's no contradiction. That's unity consciousness. Again, when it comes all down to it, and I said this in my New Age, BS seminar or lecture, okay? What it comes down to is preventing action. Preventing action. That's what the New Age community is designed to do. They want people inactive because the dark occultists know that the thing that is ultimately generating our reality is behavior, as you saw in that simple four-part chart, that little, building block chart that I put up there. Action is what's generating the reality. That gets generated through what we care about because our cares and our desires drive our actions. Most people will say they want things to change, but then when you say, what are you doing to make that change happen? Not a word. Silence comes back on the other end. They don't care enough to change it through their actions. That's what the generative or lost principle is about. And until that principle is regained and people get out of their laziness and most of all get out of their cowardice. Again, in that New Age lecture, I'm talking about what it ultimately comes down to in the New Age movement. And I'll look at any New Ager in the eyes. They're cowards. Cowards. Ultimately, they know the evil that we're up against, and they intend to do not a damn thing about it. Many people want to deceive you through these religious notions, okay, which is all about getting people to stand down and accept their chains. This next section I call spiritual currency or spiritual currencies, all right? There's two spiritual currencies, time and attention. Now, look, we can readily see this, right? Time is money, people say. It's currency, right? What am I going to spend my time on? What am I going to pay attention to? Pay attention. You pay for something, you get something in return when you pay for something, right? That's what attention will get you here. It will get you something in return. You pay attention, you're going to come out of here with a lot of understanding. This is what real money is, folks. Real money. This will get you real money. One I, mon I. Okay? If you want real money instead of the fake Federal Reserve nonsense fiat paper currency money that isn't worth the paper it's printed upon, then keep thinking that that has value. If most of the time we're spending our time on nonsense and trivialities and, divisive things and TV and sports and all other kinds of entertainment and distraction, well, you're going to have a return on that investment, and that return is going to be low. It's not going to result in much money, real money. Most importantly, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of quality am I getting in return for my investments of time and money? Time and attention, I'm sorry. Okay? These are the spiritual currencies, and that's what most people don't want to give. They don't want to give these freely for a return on investment. They don't want to pay attention to the right things. They don't want to spend time on the right things. Is this what we're doing with our time and attention? Sitting behind the hypnosis box? Which means suppression of knowledge. Hypnosis is the suppression of knowledge or the suppression of spirit. Or are we going to devote our time to some pursuits of wisdom, which means developing knowledge, converting it to understanding by processing it accurately, and then converting it into wisdom through action, through right action. And, you got to read to do this. People don't want to hear that either. Okay? Reading is required. The ancient Romans had two words, it was the same word, okay? That meant two different things in their language. The word was liber, L-I-B-E-R. Liber meant free, as in not a slave. A free being would be described as liber, free. It's the basis of the English word liberty, liberty, freedom, okay? They had the same word also meant a different concept. So the word liber didn't just mean free. If it was used in a different context, does anybody know what else the word liber meant, L-I-B-E-R, meant in Latin? Book. It meant book. Does that tell us something? They associated the Latin word for book also meant free in their language. Okay? And again, liber is the basis for the word library. Okay? Library. Okay? where you can go to become free if you read the right books. Natural law has been called many different things in different traditions throughout the world at different times in history. Let's look at what some people have called it. It's been called the law of cause and effect, or the laws of cause and effect. And there's a scientific connotation to this concept of cause and effect too. Even scientists will say an effect invariably follows a cause. And they'll also say things like, for every action, there exists an equal and opposing reaction. So there's a consequence when an action is taken. In the more New Age circles, you've heard it referred to as the law or laws of attraction. Okay, I call this presentation the real law of attraction. So, however, there are some good things that the New Age community, and I don't tell you it's all bad. I don't make that blanket statement. Okay, it is a religion in many respects, but however, there are some truths embedded in it that can be taken on their own, and that can be. Value can be gleaned from. So one of those sayings is the energy that we emit is the energy that we attract. This is true. What we're putting out into the universe is what we're getting in return from the universe and what we're creating in our reality. Energy flows where attention goes. I just talked about this in the last section. What we put our attention on is what ultimately gets manifested in the world. As you think, feel, and act, so you shall be. Some of the teachers of different variants of law of attraction teachings have only put the first part in that. As you think, so you will be. No. As you think, feel, and act, so you will be. And most of all, as you act, so you will be. Most of all. Okay? So, it's been called karma. It's been called moral law, as I talked about before. And this is, captured beautifully by the phrase, what we sow, we reap. The seeds that you scatter, that's what's going to grow, and that's the fruit that you're going to harvest. So, a very accurate way of looking at it. Again, it's been called consequentialism. That's another thing I could put into this chart. In other words, that there is free will, but there is no free will without consequence. That's called consequentialism. That would be another very accurate way of referring to natural law. And finally, the golden rule, it's been called. Okay? And it's been stated in the affirmative as do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. I find this much more powerfully stated in the negative, or what I call the apophatic variant. And we'll talk about what apophatic and apophasis means in a few moments. I think it would have been much less ambiguous, the golden rule, if it was said like this. Do not do to others as you would prefer not to have done unto you. Now the ambiguity goes away because people want to be treated slightly differently. Hey, a masochist might want to get beaten by a sadist. Okay? But that doesn't mean, do that to others because you like it. The first principle of natural law I call the generative polarity, or in other words, this is the force or energy that we are using at the base level to start the process of creation, or you could say of co-creation. Okay? We're co-creating the reality that we experience with the laws of nature. So you could look at the first first expression of natural law, which is the generative polarity, as the force that we use to set all of the other events which are to come, which are to manifest in our lives, into motion. Or in other words, the force that we use to generate or create the quality of our experience. That's the generative polarity. The positive expression of the generative polarity is love. It is this force that opens up our consciousness. It's the flowering expression of consciousness. Now, the negative expression of the creative polarity is the exact opposite of love. So people will automatically think, well, that's hate. And it is not. Because the thing that puts consciousness in a box and prevents it from growing and keeps it where it's at is what? Fear. There it is. Fear. Fear is the basis for unconsciousness. You cannot be unconscious of anything in particular unless you fear it. Fear is the force which influences us to become closed to the truth, and it is the force which ultimately shuts down our awareness. That's why so many people are unconscious, because they are fearful. They are fearful of the responsibility that comes with knowledge, and most of all, they are fearful of having to act based upon knowledge, because that requires courage. The initiating expression is the first stage of tangible and recognizable results which we produce in our lives after we have, quote unquote, set the ball rolling, okay, set the dynamic in motion, by choosing between the generative polarities of either love or fear. All right? So, we choose love and something starts to happen. We become open to truth, right? Well, love is the expansive force for consciousness that opens our minds to the truth and awareness. So what do we gain as a result of accepting or existing in the vibratory energy called love? We gain knowledge, which is the acceptance of truth. Since love opens us up to truth, knowledge is its reception. It is the receiving of truth. We come to know. Okay? So that's how it starts. I call this the initiating expression. Now, of course, there's a negative initiating expression if we are existing in the vibratory dynamic of fear. That would be the opposite of knowledge. What is it? Ignorance. Right. Hey, now, this is what I put forward as knowledge. This is my imagery for knowledge. Okay? That's a being who knows themselves. You know, and as the mystery traditions of Greece put forward at the Delphic Oracle, know the self and you will know the universe. In other words, know the microcosm and you will know the macrocosm. The positive aspect of this initiating expression is knowledge or the acceptance of truth. Knowledge positively influences the quality of our lives because it positively influences our decision-making processes that lead to understanding in every area of our lives. You want to know how something works and ultimately create something good? You have to have knowledge. You want to know how a car works? Keep it running in good order? You have to have knowledge. You want to know how a computer works? Keep it running in good order? You have to have knowledge. Learning is the key. It's the answer. Knowledge is the answer. And people don't want to hear that. So again, the negative initiating expression is ignorance. Ignorance is the refusal of truth. It is the refusal to gain knowledge. It's all there to just shut the consciousness down and keep people in a depressed psychological state and keep them in a state of psychological infancy. Thomas Jefferson said that if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Freedom and ignorance are antitheses of each other that can never coexist simultaneously. Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor can any be easily subdued. When knowledge is diffused, that means it's everywhere present, and virtue is preserved, meaning morality. On the contrary, when people are universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, meaning purely selfish and only worried about themselves, they will sink under their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." Socrates said that the only good is knowledge and the only evil is ignorance. And this is a quote I'd like to be remembered for. Willful ignorance in the presence of knowledge is the measure of a bad person. And people will say that's extremely harsh. That's true. That doesn't make the statement untrue. The statement is true as well. It is a harsh statement. Ignorance is the root cause of all evil. And since only knowledge eradicates ignorance, it is our duty and moral obligation, there's that term, to educate ourselves as well as the masses around us. Let's look at the next expression. The internal expression is what happens inside of us, very simply. So now, we've started creating with a polarity. Something has happened in the world. either acceptance of truth or refusal of truth. Now something's going to take place inside of us, right? So look, this is the foundation that lies underneath the trivium. That's as deep as it gets. Consciousness or unconsciousness, love or fear. That's what everything is a choice about. Knowledge or ignorance. There's one thing that's real, and then this is the illusion. Okay? These are two aspects of the same thing. This is consciousness, and this is its lack. This is acceptance of truth, and this is the lack of that. The positive aspect of the internal expression is when we come to understand through developing the knowledge and the acceptance of truth that we are sovereign. I call sovereignty internal monarchy. Internal monarchy. Now, monarchy means one ruler. Mon means one, is a prefix for one, and archon in Greek means ruler or master. So, internally, we each need to master and rule ourselves. This is our kingdom that we get to rule and nowhere else. We don't get to rule over anybody else. Many people think they're the rulers of other people, but they're wrong. Each of us is a sovereign being. Sovereignty, as we're going to see, means that you're not owned by anyone else. No one else owns you if you're sovereign. Whether you know it or not, whether you are familiar with the term or not, every single human being on this planet is a sovereign being. As a state of consciousness, sovereignty means that one has unified the three aspects of their consciousness, such that there is no internal contradiction between one's thoughts, emotions, and actions. We become a being that as we think, so we feel, so we speak and act. This phonetic variation that we express as v or v in English, in Latin was P or B. It was represented by a P or a B. So what we're really seeing here is suver, okay? But it was pronounced in Latin super, like stupor. Well, what does super mean? Super, you're beyond, you're above and beyond, okay? It means above or beyond, that's what it means. A superman is one who's beyond an ordinary man, right? The Latin noun regnum comprises the second part of the etymological root of this word. Regnum, it comes from rex regis in Latin, or regis. It means king. So regnum was the king's rulership. Regnum means his reign. It's where the word reign comes from in English, regnum, in Latin. It means rulership or externally imposed control. Okay? Not control in the context, I'm going to control my emotions, I'm going to control my behavior. No. It means I'm going to control you externally by imposing my will over your will through coercion. That's the context of rulership or control that I'm talking about here. So put them together. Super regnum, sovereign, means above or beyond externally imposed rulership or control by another. That's what it means. Sovereign means not a subject to another being, like a king, like one who considers himself a king. And it means not a slave to someone who considers themselves your master. That's all sovereign means, folks. Not a slave. Let's look at the negative internal expression for natural law, which is confusion. Now, confusion results when we are in ignorance. That's the emotional dynamic, the feeling that takes place within the individual. This is the lack of understanding. Confusion only happens in a lack of understanding. When we have not taken in knowledge, because we are afraid, we are in fear, okay? Ignorance results, and then confusion happens internally. Now, in that state of lack of understanding, we're confused. So there's no rulership within. Inside of us, there's anarchy, which means the absence of ruler, not the absence of rules, which I'm going to get into later. Anarchy means there's no ruler, no master. So if there's no master inwardly, we have a big problem. because that means there's no self-mastery, there's no self-control, there's no self-discipline, and ultimately, there's no self-love. And that results in an understanding that we don't truly own ourselves. It would result in the absence of self-ownership, which is what we're experiencing as a species, that other people believe they own other people. So if there's love present and knowledge has been taken in and it's been understood and we understand that we're sovereign and we're expressing self-ownership and self-mastery, what state manifests in society? Freedom. There it is. Freedom can only manifest when those preceding conditions are in place. It cannot magically manifest by any other means. If we say we want to be free, this is the path we have to take. Consciousness, acceptance of truth, and an understanding of our own sovereignty through self-mastery. It can't happen any other way. It's not possible. It's not about my freedom. It's about our freedom. It's about freedom for all beings. And guess what? Our, when I say that in relationship to the earth, doesn't just mean human beings. It means all beings, including the animal kingdom. So the positive aspect of the external expression is freedom, or what I call external anarchy, meaning externally, there are no rulers. There is no condition of masters and slaves. Okay? So that's what anarchy actually means, the absence of slavery. That's what it really means. True freedom for all should be seen as the goal of spiritual development. Such a state can only manifest as a result of human society's adherence to natural law. Now, there's a negative external expression, and you can call it multiple things. You can call it totalitarianism. You could call it slavery. I term it simply control, externally imposed control. And this manifests in things like the oncoming police state, which I wouldn't even say is oncoming. I would say it's here. Say we're already living in it. It's not something that's going to happen in the future. It's something that's happening in the present. The fifth and final expression for natural law, how it operates in our lives, is what I call the manifestation, or the result that we create. So the positive manifestation is order, or what we would call all the things we say we want. Manifested goodness. Everything being okay, not creating self-inflicted chaos or suffering. The negative manifestation is the opposite of order, chaos. Chaos is manifested evil. Complete disregard for other people, a breakdown, me first. Knock everybody else down, get what I want. Don't worry about anybody else being hurt. Survival is all that matters. Even if I have to step on somebody else to get it, to make that happen. If you're not seeking truth and trying to develop knowledge, that's how this information remains occult. And that's how the control system stays in place. They want you to externalize your power to a deity or a guru. Once you do that, you're accepting your chains. You're saying, I have no power. Let me tell you something, folks. I'm not powerless. I am full of power. Why? Because I have knowledge of how things actually work. Nobody can tell me that I'm owned by somebody else and can get me to believe it because I have understanding of my sovereignty. If they can take that away from you by getting you to de-emphasize the importance of knowledge, of self-knowledge, they own you. Not waiting on somebody to come down and save you, whether it be Zoroaster or the aliens from Zeta Reticuli or Ashtar Command or Jesus Christ. Okay? You keep waiting on an external savior, you're going to be waiting in your chains forever. The knowledge of truth is what the Christ figure himself proclaimed would be the pathway to true freedom. I'm telling you, I was a priest in Satanism. And I'm telling you, the concept of moral relativism is satanic belief. It is satanic ideology. It's it's their second tenet. They have 4 pillars. The 4 pillars of Satanism are self-preservation is the highest aspiration, and nothing comes above it. The second tenet is there is no such thing as the objective difference between right and wrong. Right is what's good for me, wrong is what's bad for me, personally. And that's it. And I get to make that up based on my likes, preferences, and whims. Okay? The third tenet is social Darwinism, which is an extension of macrobiological Darwinian theory. Okay? Social Darwinism, an oligarchy or a ruling class gets to direct the herd because we know better. And it's just our right to do so because our intellect makes us superior. And the fourth pillar is eugenics. Since we are ultimately God, since we decide what's real and what's not real, and we give that perception to the rest of the herd, and we get to decide what's right and wrong, well, we're God here. And therefore, we get to decide who lives and who dies. That's the 4 pillars of Satanism. And you know how many people believe that nonsense? A whole lot. Way more than people in the priest class of this religion, because they are propagating these tenets everywhere in human society. So many people are Satanists and do not even know that they are Satanists. Morality, it's not right versus left. It's about right versus wrong. This whole left-right paradigm. The people are, you fall in with the left, with the Democrats, or the right, the Republicans. Has nothing to do with any of that. It's a false paradigm. The thing that all of that's a distraction for not getting you to pay attention to and understand is the difference, the real, true, and objective difference between right and wrong. And here's the difference between right and wrong in a nutshell, about as simply as I am capable of describing it. Now, we use the words correct or right to mean correct and moral. When you say, okay, what's 5 plus 5? It's 10. You're right. Meaning you are correct. That is true. That is the correct answer. That is right. Okay? And then we say, was stealing that money from Jim, was that right? To mean, was it a moral behavior? So now, why would we use the same word, again, like the ancient Romans used the same word, book and free? Okay, those 2 different concepts were represented by the same word, liber, right? And there's a reason, because reading will put you on the path to true freedom if you read the right books. Okay? Why would in the English language, we have other words to mean the same concepts, but the word right means 2 things simultaneously. It means both correct and it means moral. There's a reason, because they mean the same thing. Correct is moral. Correct meaning that it is in alignment with that which is true, means literally, by definition, if it is true, then it is moral. The more you are following something that is false, that is not based in truth, the more you are going down the path of immorality, of wrongdoing. So we have to come to know what is true regarding right and wrong if we are going to be able to correctly, with wisdom, choose between these 2 modalities of behavior. So, right, again, it means both correct, which is based in truth, and moral, which means that the action, if taken, if acted upon, is in harmony with natural law. Actions based in it do not result in harm to other sentient beings. That's the definition of right. Now look at how simple that definition is. And think about it for a moment. We're talking about what is a right? Meaning, what do you have a right to do? And what you have a right to do is no different than what I have a right to do. What I'm telling you here is every single human being on this planet has the exact same rights. Not one person has one more right than another being. Not one person has one less right than another being. To think that anybody has more or less rights anywhere on the earth at any time in history is a fallacy. It is a lie. It is a deception. It is wrong. It is not correct. It is not based in truth. Rights are universal and the exact same for every human being. Blanket statement, absolute truth. Let the ego chew on it and deal with it. Okay? And again, the ego will have a hard time with this in many cases, with many people. They'll hear that and they'll want to throw a glass at me. So, look at the definition again. A right. So, when you make a definition, right, this is a noun. Right? A noun's a person, place, or thing in the English language. We're talking about a noun here. You look up the word right, it's a noun, meaning a right. A right that we have to enact, to take, is an action. You have to start a definition with the same type of word. You're defining a noun, you got to give it a noun to start the definition. A right is an action. Most people will never even be able to tell you that. Just say, could you define what a right is to me? They will not give you this noun. A right is an action. So is a wrong an action. A right is an action that if you take it, it does not cause harm to other sentient beings. Now, if you don't know what the definition of a right is, you certainly don't know whether you're choosing accurately between a right and a wrong, between right and wrong behavior. You can't. It's not possible. So let's look at what a wrong is. To even start this, right, what have we based this definition on? Actions based in it do not result in harm, right? That's the negative of another definition. Well, it's the negative of this definition. So you can only actually define a right by knowing what a wrong is. A right technically cannot be defined outside of the negative. A right can only be defined apophatically, meaning understanding what a wrong is and then stating that it is anything that falls outside of the parameters of wrongdoing. So what we're going to do is apophasis. We're going to do apophatic inquiry regarding right and wrong. So what is not a right? Ways that we can cause harm to other sentient beings. So what we're doing here is we're going to list the boundary conditions for natural law here, for breaking natural law. If we take these actions, we are breaking natural law because the action is a cause which results in the effect of harm to another being. What's one of the main horrible, wrong things that somebody can do to another person? Kill them. Murder them. Murder, as a verb in Hebrew, is a completely different word and a totally different connotation than the verb to kill. Because what they're saying is, don't take life without any right to take it. Meaning that you initiated the violence. And that's what murder is. It's the initiation of the taking of somebody else's life when you had absolutely no right to take that life. Now, if someone is coming after you, your rights, there may be times when you do have to take defensive action and forceful action up to and including deadly force. We're going to talk about that later. Murder is the first natural law transgression. And if you want to go down to a subsection of this transgression, you could list it as a totally separate wrongdoing. I'm keeping it in the same basic category. Assault, meaning you're directly physically accosting without right the well-being, the bodily well-being of another being, is also, it's like it would be, you could consider it attempted murder. Because assault is something that you do without right. If someone assaults somebody, they have no right to commit assault. Never exists. The right to commit assault does not exist. The right to commit murder does not exist in any circumstance, ever. Blanket statement. The right to defend oneself through physical force exists, and possibly in certain circumstances, the right to kill exists. But murder and assault can never be rights, because they always are done by being initiated without the right to do so. It is the initiation of violence. Rape is the second natural law transgression. Okay? You're coercing the free will of another person and making them sexually associate with whom they wish not to. The third natural law transgression is theft. It is the taking of property that does not belong to you. Someone else, got that property through lawful means without hurting somebody else. That's their property for as long as they are using it and being responsible for it. And you don't have a right to just take what doesn't belong to you. That's the third natural law transgression. The fourth is trespass. And that means going into somebody else's lair that they are using, that they own lawfully and that they're responsible for without their permission or consent. And you're just invading their privacy and their space. And you're taking their security away from them in that process. Okay? We do have a right to set aside a place for ourselves for our own lair. Okay? And to violate that is to trespass against somebody else in their own property. The fifth and last natural law transgression is coercion. This is forcing somebody through the threat of violence to have their will comply with your will, whether they don't wish that to be the case or not. Making somebody do something that is against their will, coercing them. And that's also not a right. Now, that's a small list. Very small list, right? We could add one more. We could add lying. Lying is also a wrongdoing. And I would consider that a theft of truth or a withholding of truth that somebody needs to understand to make accurate, informed decisions, lying to them. Okay? But essentially, these five are the overarching natural law transgressions. I challenge anybody to come up with a wrongdoing that doesn't fit into one of these categories. So far, I've never had one person able to do it. All rights are property rights. All wrongs are theft of property. The bottom line to what this section comes down to is if someone hasn't been harmed, no wrongdoing has been committed. No victim, no crime, in other words. Many people insist, there doesn't have to be a victim for there to be a crime committed. You know how many people are rotting away in a jail cell right now as we speak who have never harmed another living being? You know how many people? Tens of thousands. Okay? And no one has any right to hold them. Unless you've harmed somebody else, nobody has a right to stop you from continuing to take the action that you are taking. Rights can't be granted by human beings to other human beings. Everybody is born with the same rights because rights don't come from human beings. Rights, like the laws of nature, come from the creator of the universe. They don't come from human beings. Human beings don't make up what right and wrong are. Right and wrong are inherent to creation and are up to us to discover and recognize what they are and then live in accordance with those principles. Is taxation of any kind a right or a wrong? Is it morally acceptable and justifiable, or is it something that is actually a wrong? So let's look at what taxation really is. And again, we're not going to euphemize. We're going to talk about it straight on. So here's what taxation is. It's not what I believe it is. I'm getting down to the heart of the matter and describing what it actually is. Taxation is the claim that a specific group of people who call themselves government have been given a, quote, right. They've been delegated a right, okay? We've written down a law, and we say this people calling themselves the government and the IRS have a right to do this particular action, this activity, okay? This behavior. They've been given a right to confiscate, unwillingly, I might add, an arbitrarily chosen percentage of the product of another individual's labor. Now, let me just start with this, right? If you ask anybody, how many are you going to voluntarily pay more taxes? Nobody will raise their hand. And you say, why not? Well, because I could barely afford to pay the ones I'm paying now, and I don't want to volunteer any more money toward that endeavor. Quite frankly, I want my resources for myself to use as I see fit voluntarily. But if the government then said, well, your taxes are going up by 5%, how many people would pay them? Most people would. Because subconsciously or consciously, they recognize they're under coercion. They're actually under duress. They're being told that if they don't give this at the command of the people who are confiscating it, that some form of violence will be conducted upon them, whether through the form of fining them and saying, we're going to take more of your resources, whether by saying, we're going to throw you in a cage and make you stay there for as long as we say you need to stay there, okay? Or by actually conducting actual physical harm upon them. So, again, we're saying that this quote-unquote right is given to individuals who call themselves government, and then they have the right to confiscate this arbitrarily chosen percentage of the product of another individual's labor. Because that's what money is, okay? Or that's what, whatever we make through what we work, that's the product of our labor. We work and then we get compensated for it. So that's an exchange for labor that we have done. That's our property, because we gave labor in return for that. So this is done whether or not the other agrees to share that product voluntarily. It's not a voluntary process. Coercion is involved. Taxation is enforced by the threat of violence, which is behavior that will result in bodily harm, or imprisonment, which is the taking away of physical freedom of movement, if those from whom the product is being seized attempt to resist this confiscation. This practice is always, quote, justified, and the word justify actually breaks down etymologically. The word justify means to create a right. That's what justify actually means. Jus in Latin means right or law, and then facere means to create or to make. So to justify means to create right, to make a right up and conjure it into existence. So it's always justified or made into a right, quote unquote, by those who claim that such a practice is necessary and required to, quote unquote, uphold the common good. This is the justification offered for the seizure of the product of people's labor involuntarily. Now, if we are honest with ourselves, if we define the concept of slavery, and I think this is a good definition for slavery, would it be fair to say slavery is the involuntary confiscation of 100% of the product of the labor of another human being? That be a fair definition? You're saying you're working, I'm going to take whatever you generate as a result of that work that you're doing. It doesn't belong to you. The product of your labor doesn't belong to you. All of it belongs to me. So you work for me. I take everything that you have been able to amass or create through the labor that you have done. I think everybody here would agree that's slavery. That's as good as a definition of slavery as you're probably going to get. I mean, we can come up with some other definitions that involve coercion and physically shackling and keeping people. But if we really are honest with ourselves, what is the purpose of slavery to begin with is to make others work for free and then take all of the product of the labor. That's what slavery was conducted for. Okay? So, if we're defining slavery as the involuntary confiscation of 100% of the product of the labor of another human being, we should be able to clearly see that there is no magical percentage to which we could lower this number that would no longer make it slavery. So I ask people, if the person who's saying I'm going to confiscate 100% of your labor and keep it for myself would say, well, I'm going to take 75%. I'll take 3/4. You can keep 1/4 of what you've created. Would that no longer constitute slavery? And I don't care what you say I'm going to use the 75% for. Okay? If you're telling somebody you have no choice, 75% of your labor belongs to me, would that no longer be slavery just because they allow them to keep 25? Okay, let's lower it to 50. Is it still slavery? Okay. Well, what percentage could it possibly be lowered to for it not to be slavery anymore? Only 0. There is no percentage that it could be lowered to for it not to constitute slavery. And again, if we're being honest with ourselves, many people want to justify this in many ways by saying, oh, it's used for services which someone doesn't have a right to refuse. I tell people, hey, if I said to you, I'm a computer technician. You own a computer? Okay, I'm now your computer technician. You're not allowed to refuse my services. Just think about that for a moment. You may not refuse that I am now providing the service for your computer to keep it in good shape. Okay? First of all, what have I just taken from that gentleman? Right to choose, free will. Right there, that's slavery. I don't even have to keep going and say, hey, if you refuse, or, whether you want or don't want my computer services, I'm now your technician, and I need $200 every year. I'll come over a couple of times. I don't care whether you're happy with my service or not, okay? And if you don't pay me, I'm coming and taking the computer. Now, is that really your property if you're living under that kind of duress? Or am I just a violent criminal who's saying, I'm going to steal your stuff if you don't give me what I say? I'm holding you under extortion. That's duress. That's called duress. It means I am threatening violence unto the person unless they conform to my will. And that's what we're all held under. We're held under duress. All forms of taxation are duress. It is a master class telling people you have no right to refuse the arbitrarily set confiscation of your labor that I deem is going to be necessary for what I say it's necessary for. So how could you possibly claim that your home belongs to you if you're paying something called a property tax? That somebody is saying, for the services we provide in this community, you must pay us this percentage, and if you don't pay it, your house is going to be turned over to the government. And you know what that's called? There's a term for that, okay? When a society doesn't actually have true private property ownership rights and a higher class of masters actually owns the land and owns the property and only allows the peasant class to live upon the property for as long as they pay tribute to the master class, who can tell me what system of government that is? That's called feudalism. And that's the United States government and just about every government on the earth. You live in feudalism. There's no such thing as democracy. There's certainly not a constitutional republic, that's for sure, okay? If we're being honest with ourselves, taxation's merely a euphemism for theft, violence, and slavery, the practices upon which it is actually based. And since no individual anywhere on earth has the right to claim ownership of the product of another's labor, such behavior can never be, quote, delegated to a group of people and called a right. Therefore, it follows logically that all forms of taxation, I don't care what they are, excise tax, property tax, gift tax, inheritance tax, income tax, I don't care what form it is, taxes on corporations even, okay? All forms of taxation are always wrong according to natural law because they are all based in the destruction of free will. They are based on coercion and they are ultimately based upon violence, all of which are wrongdoings, all of which are forms of theft and all of which not one individual has the right to perform upon another. And this is what people want to justify and believe can be magically turned into a right, just because they want to euphemize it and call it taxation. So if I say carrots are off limits for your consumption, sir, and they may not be ingested, I've just made a claim that I own your body. Well, what's the claim on the ownership of another person's body called? Slavery. So how about licenses and permits? These are claims that a group of people who call themselves government. And again, we're going back and visualizing. Imagine one person trying to make this claim to another person. Nobody would find it legitimate. Nobody would find that one person may make that claim to another person. Yet we think these other people called government have rights that individuals don't have. That's what we think. That's called mind control. Mind control is getting people to accept some people have rights that other people don't have. That's what it is. You don't have the right to come and speak. No protests will be tolerated or we'll hit you with sound and water cannons. And people just laid down and accepted it. The whole city of Pittsburgh. Because, we're going to go and ask them for a permit. And they just said no. No, you don't have that right anymore. We find you on the street, you're getting blasted with a sound cannon and deafened. Some people went permanently deaf. Permanently deaf, lost their hearing from what happened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Force is action which one always possesses the natural right to take, and this includes the defense, the physical defense of someone's person, their body, against the act of violence. Force may be applied in that situation. When you are accosted with violence, you do reserve the right to use physical force defensively against such an assault. All that matters is who started it. Because the person who actually conducted violence is the person who struck first. They initiated the immoral use of physical behavior, of physical force, physical power to coerce, compel, or restrain. Therefore, when the person beats back that physical assault with force, they have not committed an additional wrongdoing. So the question becomes, does violence magically become a right when it's conducted by government? When they shut down people's free speech rights and assembly rights? Or when they conduct direct theft from people through what's this euphemized form of slavery called taxation? Most actual Freemasons in the lodge system don't know the lost word. The lost word is no. And I would suggest to you, it is a dual word. The lost word is dual, meaning it's two things. It's not just one. It is the word no, N-O, and it is the word know, K-N-O-W. Quote by R. Buckminster Fuller, "The dark ages still reign over all of humanity, and the depth and persistence of this domination are only now becoming clear. This dark ages prison has no steel bars, no chains or locks. Instead, it is locked by misorientation and built upon misinformation. Caught up in a plethora of conditioned reflexes and driven by the human ego, both warden and prisoner attempt meagerly to compete with God. All are intractably skeptical of what they do not understand. We are powerfully imprisoned in these dark ages simply by the terms in which we have been conditioned to think." Thomas Jefferson said, "A free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature." And this was also embedded in the Declaration of Independence. The laws of nature and of nature's God, and not as the gift of their magistrates. John Locke said, "The natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth and not to be under the will or legislative authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule." Former Grand Master of the Order of the Rose Cross, the Rosicrucian tradition, Francis Bacon, said, "Nature, to be commanded, must first be obeyed. If we want the forces of the cosmos on our side, we have to learn and adhere to the principles of natural law. If we do not align our behavior to that, nature will not stand with us. It will continuously stand against us, and it will itself create more strife and suffering in our lives." The psychologist Alfred Adler said, "There is a law that man should love his neighbor as himself." And he's referring, of course, here to the golden rule. "In a few hundred years, it should be as natural to mankind as breathing or the upright gait. But if he does not learn it, he must perish." And folks, I would really hope this is going to take less than a few hundred years. But based on where we're at, I'm not so sure. I think we could do it a lot faster than that if we accept the key that's been shown here today, that, as I said before, has the power to unlock all the locks on all the doors to all the cages. And that's what the knowledge of natural law comprises. If we let go of the things that are holding us back and break our mental chains of bondage, we can create a world that is based in actual real freedom. It is possible. I'm not telling you it's not going to be arduous work or a difficult journey, but it can be done. Okay? If we choose to do that, we're going to see advances and things that are going to be created that the world is going to look so drastically different if we go down that middle path to the truth and to order and to justice through the understanding of natural law and actually applying it and living it in our lives, that the changes we're going to experience are going to be so positive and so transformative that we can scarcely even imagine what the world will be like on the other side of that work, on the other side of that transformation. Will that be done? Maybe. Maybe not. The answer will come from what you see in the reflection of that device right there. That's what will determine it. Nothing else. It's up to each individual. Finally, this right here, Lex Rex, simply means the law is king. The law is king. Lex Rex. That's my final slide. Thanks so much. Let's do some question and answer.